All right, welcome everybody to this afternoon's training. We're going to be going over job coaching strategies and fading today. I am going to get the attendance and documents put in the chat for today, but the code word is enlightenment, going along with kind of our training theme. So I will get that stuff posted. If you guys were with us on Thursday, I did have myself double booked. I do have my double booked again. So I'm going to be getting off for just a couple of minutes this time. And then we'll be joining back on as soon as I'm done with my other meeting. But other than that, just as a reminder to please turn your cameras on if you can. We're basing our drawings for the gift cards for participation off of that. So please use your camera if you can. I'll get stuff put in the chat box, and I think I will go ahead and get it turned over to Russell.
Right, great. Thanks, Jordan, and thanks everybody for being here again. When I looked over the last few topics, my messy desk pile here, job analysis has been something I think we probably hit for like the last training was actually on job analysis, but I know that when we talked about matching, carving, it all, and if you're some of you may be in the competitive integrated employment training, and it's the same thing with customized employment. I think any employment is this idea of understanding, and so we've kind of hit on, and that's where we'll start today. When we get to this, the start with the slides today is we'll start with job analysis, right? That's kind of where we ended up, where you have to figure out. If we're talking about job coaching or fading, we have to know, what's being learned and how it's going to be taught, and kind of what the standard we'll talk about today is, what's good enough, in terms of all of us. I love Beth Keaton. I think she came up with that, or it's her kind of who's our executive director, her idea of, all of us in every workplace, we all strive, I think, to be the best we can be all the time. But we also, if we're honest with ourselves, I think I have the experience where I'm constantly disappointing myself, where I'm, I feel like I'm doing what I can do, and it meets I'm doing what needs to be done. And I think it's good enough, for where I'm at now. All of us have a lot of stuff going on, and multiple kind of priorities and responsibilities and roles. And so I think we all have we're all shooting for the stars, for the ideal, for best performance every time. But we know that we're human, and best performance, 100% productivity, it's not needed, I think, most times, right? It's not in work. We understand how to be a good employee, how to do, help business do business. But and we understand that there's a good enough threshold, right? There's typically in any workplace, there's a threshold where, okay, yeah, you've met the standard, and then going above and beyond is awesome, but not always possible or even necessary, even warranted, based on everything else that's going on at your workplace. So we're going to talk a little bit about a different approach to, it's the same thing as job coaching, what we've thought of job coaching. And I can't remember if we've had the consultative employment support. So I'll ask Jordan when she comes back. We've had that training here in South Dakota. But I'm going to show you, we have the discovery and job development Fidelity models. We also have a kind of our version of the piece of the pie that's typically been called job coaching, fading, ongoing supports, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to look at something. It's going to be not super fun. It's going to be a kind of a, well, it's called a Fidelity scale, which is going to show you about, I just want to run through real quick about 7 different pieces of how we're trying to think about how we're trying to think about on-the-job supports, which we're calling consultative employment supports. It just means that it's the same thing that we've always been taught to do, which is, we should not be the default primary trainer. We should not be the default liaison for communication. Right? We know this, that our job is to try to help the person become part of the workforce, just like any other employee. But sometimes services have kind of disrupted that. So that's what I want. And so I want to show you that first and ask you if you have any questions about that. We'll start there. Let's take this. Okay, here we go. Okay. So I sent this to Jordan. I think she's going to share it with you all. So I don't want you to get, there's these tenets, right? And again, this is like a research thing. We're using this as a part of a couple of research projects. We're trying to push customized employment towards evidence-based practice. It's been emerging practice, best practice for a while. And we've had a couple of, with the discovery fidelity scale, as you can see, lots of acronyms there. It actually has made it through its first pass of like I don't even understand the statistical terms of like, of getting evidence and data and viewing them from different perspectives and making sure that they're verifiable and replicable and all that kind of good stuff. So that's not the important, well, it's important to me that it's important to all of us that we do things that are independently and objectively determined to be good, and that are evidence-based, meaning that they increase the probability, they're demonstrated to significantly and substantially, it's not random, increase the probability of doing good work, right? So that part's obviously important to me, but I'm not super into, I'm so sorry, I'm getting a request to join at 3 p.m. that I thought I told them I couldn't join. Sorry, I'm on a training. This virtual stuff is scheduling not great. So anyway, so that's what this is, a design like this, like the -1. Some of you have seen this already for the discovery stuff. So it's designed like this so it can be evaluated and kind of shared and that kind of stuff. But the ideas are what I'm interested in, and so I just wanted to walk through. So there, when you look at this, it's pretty big. It's probably about 30 pages or so, and in the first part about system stuff, that's the design of funding, of policy, that kind of stuff. Don't worry about that at all. And the second part is the interesting part for services. So you'll see, and this is stuff we'll talk about in the slides. I definitely give you way too many slides for today. We're not going to be able to get them all. But I'm trying to figure out, as we teach this stuff, kind of the best way to do that. And I haven't quite perfected that yet. So we're talking the consultative employment specialist. Again, it's a label, just employment, on-the-job employment supports. So what we want to focus on, and this is, I think, something that's not always stated, the ordinary and customary ways of the business. Using the ordinary and customary ways of the business provides consultative employment training support to both the coworker, primarily responsible for training, and the new employee. So, this sets the default at, our job is to support whomever is going to be doing the training, the coworker, right? Because we want things to be natural. Our default is to natural features of the workplace following the systematic instruction training. And so we don't want to immediately co-opt or assume that we're going to be doing the training, right? That, your employee is hired, this is your new employee, they'll go through training just like anybody else. And so we're going to support the person doing the hiring and the new employee, the supported employee. So anyway, so when you look at like the different qualities of providing this, the tenant just needs the I guess character or quality characteristic. So you'll see that it goes anywhere from that the employment specialist is deciding on the training needs based on the job analysis. It's our job to say, how stuff's going to be, how the person's going to learn without checking with how things are ordinarily completed. And then so that's unacceptable all the way through. The specialist ensures ordinary and customary connections with other coworkers are developed, even though they do not have the primary responsibility to train the new employee. So if you read all three of these, it's essentially what it's saying is that we are that we're supporting the training staff, the staff of the workplace, and that the staff, that's +1, +2 is that the new employee, the person that we're supporting, has ordinary and customary interactions with coworkers, but the coworker primarily responsible for training. And then number 3, and this is about belonging, about being having coworker supports, which were natural supports, which helps fading, of course. It's all about the person learning the job and thus fading. And then the exemplary, which has to include all of those, the consultative employment specialist, again, which is a new phrase for job coach, ensures ordinary and customary connections with other coworkers are developed, which I had mentioned. So I just want to walk through these real quick with you. Yes. Okay. The specialist consults with both a coworker who trains a new employee and the new employee based on discrete observations made during training. Okay, so what this is saying is you go in, with an idea, as you get to know the person with a job analysis, what's needed, but then so you have a plan, right? But then once the plan's put in action, that during training that we adjust. And so what it says is that we're teaching people how to work with a person, maybe generalizing with disability, based on disability, and kind of labels, blah blah blah. Whereas the positive, the acceptable ones are that during training, now we're learning new knowledge about how people best learn and support it, and then we consult with both the coworker and the new employee, right? And that's where the consultative comes in. You're going to see that many times throughout this, is that we're supporting the workplace, right? And the individual supported, obviously, and the people who are training them. So not just the trainer, though, too, as the last one said. We're facilitating connections and relationships. Use the most natural ways and means possible. Again, if you know systematic construction, that's systematic construction language, to communicate person and situation-specific rehabilitation expertise. And then the last one, I think that gets a little bit weird here. The consultative employment specialist informs in a manner that builds employers' training and ongoing psychosocial rehabilitation support capacities. So I don't like that phrase, but basically I think it means, all well-rounded. They see the person for a person, not just in this niche support employment employee or supported employee. Okay. All right, anyway, so I'll go through these quickly. Demonstrates preferences for the business's standard training and communication processes. Again, that's natural ways. That's a systematic construction notion that we're defaulting towards how information is getting communicated, right? To what happens typically. And this is wonderful too, where exemplary means like it's not just it's not just the training. Of course that's needed, that's acceptable. That's what you have to do with the test. But also, if you do exemplary, it really hits into culture. The employment specialist supports a primary trainer and other coworkers to teach a new employee unspoken and unwritten natural rules that are critical to employment success, but not directly related to skill acquisition. So we talked about this, I think, in many of the trainings we do about, how to look busy when you're not. I've told the story about Angela 1,000 times, where she worked in a daycare setting and where they were told not to have their phones out after they got not her, but her coworkers got in trouble during the recess part. But slowly, after a week went by after that and the stop on the list went out, then her coworkers started kind of pulling out their phones and watching it. And when the supervisor and owner would come by, they'd hide it. And I noticed that Angela had a tendency to, to not see those cues, or nobody kind of bumped her on the shoulder to put your phone away for whatever reason. So, and so there's an unwritten, spoken or unwritten natural rules, right? So I think it's it's not just the, it's not just the facts of the tasks, right? And then good plus 2 is that, we're enlisting other people to brainstorm suggestions, offer guidance for finding solutions. I think that's a wonderful, just the idea that, it's not just us, obviously, that we're asking for help, asking for assistance. We are not the experts. We don't know how to do the job. For certain things, which we'll talk about, we may need to learn how to do the job and provide some, if we do some, heavy duty kind of systematic instruction, task analysis, that kind of stuff. But the idea here is that we're defaulting to the genius, and the kind of wisdom of the workplace. And again, depending on the workplace, how much of that is valuable and accessible. We'll have to figure that out. Okay, cool. So anyway, so okay, so this, and then this 2.4 talks about, we may be training. We may provide direct training, obviously with communicating with the business, but there is a role for we say default to natural settings, default to natural ways information is communicated, or I'm sorry, means of communication, ways things are done. But there are times when we're going to have to get more involved. We're the ones that know the person through discovery or maybe assessment, or we know different approaches to teaching, more powerful methods towards teaching. And so, so we may have to, and this is not like broadly though, I think what I love here is that we've broken it down to, if you look at good plus 2, task specific. So we look at each responsibility, each duty, and it's not broad-based, right? We don't assume that we're going to need to be involved in everything or nothing. We assume that we'll be involved in whatever works, and we'll jump in with including the natural trainer as much as possible. Okay, and then the other part is that, the exemplary part of this is that we're not doing this, even though we are providing teaching, we're not on an island. So I think sometimes we have a tendency to do that where, and I think just in general with employment supports, we've been talking in the other class just about how, I don't know if sometimes people will defer to you, they'll presume that you're the expert, whether it's in teaching or, job development, or whatever, and so this idea that somehow we have access to knowledge that can't be shared, or we have some unique, unique talent or skill that can't be accessed by others. And I just don't think that's true. I think everything we do, we can explain it as appropriate, and we can model for the coworkers, right? And teach them a little bit on because again, we're not going to teach people systematic instruction. We're not teaching employers consultative employment supports, right? Or job coaching, to how to be a good job coaching that, right? We're teaching in this specific instance, this is what's works, or what's useful for the learner, for the supported employee, right? In this instance. So again, on an as needed basis only, right? And so many of the concepts, these are kind of universal anyway in terms of learning. This again, the next tenet talks about ensures the new employee succeeds within the work culture. Unacceptable would be it's our job to assimilate the person into the company. Acceptable +1, which is good, which is awesome. It's like A. Make sure that the person's involved in including the culture by negotiating changes if necessary. The A+, and this is a really good one. I think I don't know if Beth or Steve did give this training, but this is, I think they always pick out this part. Good +2, and this is critical. The consultative employment specialist ensures the new employee has at least one coworker and/or a supervisor that believes in them. someone who can positively interpret who this new employee is. Crucial, and we'll talk on the slides if we get to it about, that's crucial, and how do you hold on to this, as the world changes, as we've just been through, how do you, people leave, new people come on, but I just love this positively interpret. There was somebody on the training earlier, I had come across this phrase, I think it's a Carl Rogers phrase, I've read it in other books, but it's this idea of holding people in a quote unquote unconditional positive regard. This idea that people don't have to earn, they don't have to hit a threshold for us to regard them positively, unconditionally, right? That people can find stuff, in people that they can help interpret it in ways that are, that connect them to others, right? They can show, they can describe why this person's worth their time and worth their attention, right? Worth being involved in the group. So at least one person, it has that, that we, and again, this idea of I like the idea of a mentor or just a, just somebody who digs them, to use the kind of less scientific language or work, just that they connect somehow. And then +3, ensures that they're building relationships, opportunities increase, etc. Okay, I think there's 2 more. Sorry, I just wanted to show you these. Okay. All right, so we will be, depending on the individual, and again, if you're using a customized approach, this should be part of the process or any kind of negotiation. If you're working with somebody with a significant impact disability, the assumption is something you're going to need to build in, negotiate accommodations and adaptations, and that this is part of the process, but part of the process that is now, but also forward-looking, and is communicated in a way that makes sense, right? So unacceptable is that only the needs of the business are considered. When issues or challenges arise, the employment specialist makes changes to accommodate the needs of the business. And then, needs in business are obviously considered. It's reasonable accommodation. But the idea is that we want to figure out how the modifications will be beneficial to the new employee and what they're doing, and also that they can be justified. I think sometimes in kind of universal. We'll talk about some examples in a second. Maybe universal design approaches, so that they're forward-looking, right? That their accommodations are going to last. They're accommodations that are going to make sense. They're accommodations that aren't going to somehow hinder the person having dignity and respect at work. And then that's the one, I think, 21 pages. Ongoing support. So this is, what happens after you fade. And so I think that often there's not, and we've talked about this, so there's not a huge plan written down, right? And I think it's really important to have a strategy, plan at first when we're leaving. And then it's also important to revisit that plan. And so I think that, we have a tendency, I think sometimes to sayonara, have a good work life. And then we get brought back in maybe if there's a problem. And then we're kind of doing kind of post hoc, trying to solve a problem. So, I think we want to make sure that we have, when you start, you have a fading plan, you have an ongoing support plan, but it's going to change as the process moves forward. And so we'll need to talk about it, renegotiate it +2. There will be new people will come in, right? New coworkers. And so we want to make sure that we're reflecting that. So the stuff today you're going to see in the slides is going to be some old stuff, but also reorganize a little bit of new stuff to talk about the consultative employment support. Jordan, did we do this? Did Beth or Steve do the consultative? I can't remember. Employment supports.
No, it's on the schedule for next year.
Cool. So I don't mean to, I think, all these can be found on our website. When you see the stuff, the worry is that it's just kind of, it's just a lot of stuff, doesn't make sense, which is totally understandable. That's how I felt. You're not trained in that by downloading it off our website or me giving it to you. But I think that the concepts are pretty accessible. If you can take them out of when they talk about use tenant language or social, psycho, whatever. As just, I think they're just general. I think they're quality indicators, of what's in place when we're doing good. What job coaching, what we used to call job coaching. Again, when we're keeping in mind that we are wanting we want the natural features of the workplace to be prominent. So, okay, cool. Any questions about that? Before we move on. Sorry if I yawned a couple of times. I've not been able to catch my.
I have just a quick question before you move on to the next thing, Russell. I shared the PDFs for the training today, and on my end, it appears that you guys got them, but I am getting notification that some other people have not. Are you guys able to see them in the chat, or do I have an issue?
Yes. I can.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Lori, you get it.
Woo. Love that. It's a demonstration of infinity, if you ever want to. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I got them. Thanks, Jordan. Okay, all right, great. So learning and fading, right? Consulting, teaching, and support. Job coaching is again, I just think that the shift is, and again, it's not much of one if you've been doing. It's just like that. I think a lot of any model. I think there are limitations to every model, of course, but any model of employment supports can kind of pull on, or may already have qualities or characteristics or strategies or tactics, that are just good tactics, right? Are good. Like if you don't know somebody very well, and they're hard to get to know in your offices, just go to their house, right? Or go somewhere where they're comfortable, where they're, nearby. And that's something that people did well before customized employment happened. I have this, Denise Bissonnette, this great book, Beyond Traditional Job Development. And it was published in 1994. And so that's a good, probably, 6 years before and again, customized employment's my anchor, but 6 years before customized employment, and she was doing proposals or she's doing proposals, or started then, and wrote a whole book about it, about taking the entrepreneurial approach towards job development, right? So whatever labels things have aren't really, they're not that important. The important stuff is the content. So the idea is, when people were when we thought of job coaching, folks were doing the stuff we're talking about and it was called job coaching, right? We're just, as we shift the language, which you haven't had the consultative support yet, so I'm glad we'll have some time for that. When we say consulting, teaching, and support, the idea is just to shift the notion from the job coach being responsible for it all in the worst case scenario, or significant portion of it, and getting better, case to facilitating, right? Kind of broke. Again, I like the idea of brokering, right? That if we step in and we have our hat on, people may not offer help. They may defer to us, teachers, other people in the workplace. It may inhibit the individual from making relationships, because we've all had I've talked about all y'all, that where coworkers, managers talk to us instead of talking to the person. So I think I like consultative. I like because it sets this tone from the start. So, and I think that in any any kind of person's on the job, they're not going to learn the entire job in the 90 days you have or whatever, stability, however long that takes, because it takes some time depending on the job. They're going to get a good jump on it. They're going to learn what they need within the time frame, and then we're going to make sure that we've set up the structures so that continued learning happens, continued growth, continued competency, right? As time passes, just like depending on the job. I've had jobs where I haven't really felt like I have my sea legs under me until like a year in. I feel like I can do parts of it pretty good, but the totality of it, maybe I didn't feel like I was really in flow for a while, right? And so, I just think that's how typically how you reach that good enough threshold, and then you're still you're trying to learn as time passes. And I think we just want to make sure that even if we're carving, customizing, we're restructuring, creating a new job, that typical flow occurs too. So our job is to make sure the system set up so the person learns learns the task, what the responsibilities are, the expectations, and then we get the heck out of there, right? We want to fade, we want to make sure that fading is understood as much as possible, and then we start fading as close to day one as possible. Not entirely out, but we start. We may not even need to, like in certain things, if we were able to help the colleague teach them, then we're not, like, fading doesn't even have to happen because we're not really involved in that piece, if that makes sense. So like we've already faded from that part because we're not really, we're kind of aware of it and again, facilitating our consulting, but we don't really need to fade as pulling ourselves out of the information kind of flow of how work happens. So this is kind of where we ended, I think, the last couple of times talking about job analysis. So again, whatever process you're using, we have kind of our job analysis record as a tool, first to learn what the needs are, and then also to maybe use it to kind of create something that fits, but then also then it kind of serves all these functions, right? What are the needs? How do you describe them? Then you can take those needs and you can use them to try to create something, try to restructure, negotiate. And then that same thing becomes a basis of a training plan, right? Because that information, it probably changes because if you had certain ideas about certain tasks and negotiation, it ends up over here and some of the things are dropped, some things are added, but it becomes kind of the core of training plan. So what we want to make sure when we're using job analysis is we're looking at all these routines we talked about. The core is what happens over and over again, right? The main part of the job. Episodic are, the responsibilities, duties we have that happen occasionally, right? Or as needed, but not every day or every other day. Work-related routines are the things that aren't on the job description, but are pretty important, like, when to go to lunch, when to come back from lunch, breaks, how are cultural things handled, like holidays, birthdays, celebrations, bring in coffee, sharing, potluck, any of that kind of stuff. And it's kind of related to culture too. It happens frequent enough, it becomes a routine. But then what we want to make sure that we're looking at are intersecting tasks. And we talked about that, that's where we want to, that's where, it's an algebraic term where two lines intersecting, whatever, it's, or maybe geometry. So where two lines come together. And so the idea behind intersecting tasks is that coworkers are working together, right? That they count on each other, they need each other. And so we want to try to find those and make sure they're built in. I think we asked this before, but if I were to ask you what were your intersecting tasks at your job, and we threw out meetings, like let's toss meetings. You can't say meetings, right? Because that's the easy one. Could a few of you just share what some intersecting means, like when you're working on something together with another coworker? What are some of those tasks? I worry we don't have too many of those that aren't meetings.
This is Jessica.
Hey.
I suppose in my position as employment specialist here at Lewis and Clark Behavioral, sometimes I need to work with the case managers when it comes to whether it's referring a client or if I'm going to start them in the community with a job. Sometimes we need to make sure we're on the same page about transportation, make sure client story versus staff story is the same. Sometimes I've run into that barrier, so it's always good to have the relationship with the case managers. Going from case manager to employment specialist, I have to work on not so much tapping into mental health and behavioral, but really focus on job and the background that comes with that. So it is important for me to also have that connection with the mental health treatment team. That way, for the client too, we can keep that separation where anything job related comes to me, and then anything mental health or behavioral related goes to their mental health treatment team.
Cool. And those things intertwine, right? I mean, there's not a clear, that is over here. Cool. Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. Because a big thing that I explain to my clients that come to me, because a lot of them I know from when I was a case manager. So it's also something different for them too, to try and have that separation, is I do let them know, yes, mental health and medical will play a part into connecting to what goes on in employment. But when it comes to reaching out, here's your go-to, and then here's what you can come to me for. Yeah. So yeah, it does intertwine. So it's always good to have those connections identified at the beginning when I do work with an individual.
Yeah, very cool. Great. Yeah. So yeah, wonderful. I mean, so that's a number of things there. And if I'm restating it poorly, sorry, but I mean, so there's real stuff like you said, like you're going in the community and you're verifying things, or you're exploring things, having conversations about, and then you're also, perhaps there's that don't really have much to do maybe with another person's role, but at some point they're going to intersect. Because the support need blends, from a workplace. I mean, all of our lives, that sometimes it's hard to pull it apart, right? And I think that's good in certain circumstances. Good. Sometimes it's not so good, but all of us are struggling with that. So cool, great, thank you, Jessica. Anybody else have an example?
Hey, this is Julie.
Hey.
I would say for like me, I rely heavily on the support and opinions of our job coaches, meaning after someone starts their job, I usually do the initial job coaching because I, for my own personal reasons, want to know what all their job duties are. I want to know, where I see struggles, and then, I introduce the job coaches and whatever. But when it comes time to possibly start fading out or whatever, I talk to all of them, and, the ones that have been their main job coach, like, what are your thoughts on this? What are you seeing as a trend that maybe they need to work on, or are they just amazing? And, and the same when, well, now it will be with Lori, but like with Autumn, we work together a lot on like, okay, so we have these 3 potential job offers or whatever that companies came to us with, asking for us if we have anybody that we could place there. And then we would work together on figuring out who we think would best fit this particular job as opposed to the other person. We kind of weigh the pros and cons, and again, reach out to the job coaching, because we consider us all one big team anyways. So, and kind of reaching out for their opinions, and we all work very closely together, and,
Cool. So you're saying,
because I value their opinion. And
cool. So you're saying there's an opportunity, and so you'll talk as a team and think about, well, who we think may be the best fit for this and why, and then you'll share, because you may not know the person as well as your colleague does.
Exactly.
Cool. Great.
And then if it comes to a point where we don't really have anybody that could fit this certain thing, then I will always reach out to the VR counselors as well as the independent gal in town and be like, hey, this is a job opportunity that someone came to us with. However, we don't have anybody right now that would fit the bill for this job. So is there anyone that you guys can think of? Here's the information. So, I mean, and they do the same for us. So, I mean, we all kind of work together.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Yeah. Perfect. And that's through businesses, like, okay, yeah, we don't have anybody, but then I imagine it also works together the other way too, where if you're looking for, like, you have somebody you're like specifically looking for, and you want, he or she has this kind of, we call it themes or whatever you want to call it, job goal, that you'd also ask around, or, job development. That's the most obvious thing where intersecting is that hopefully you're not, we say you definitely do not want to do job development alone ever, because it's such a broad set of skills and relationships. So hopefully intersecting tasks are happening there where you guys are working on some stuff together. Not everything, but some of it. Awesome. Great. Cool. So this is I just think, if we're thinking about fading and natural supports, right? And like the grail again of our, the match is the grail, and then like, including that are natural supports. So we can get out of there and move on. I think I've told everybody of the organization in Detroit that they're really great people, and they'll find people will find jobs, and then I'm trying to use a different phrase, without knowing the employment seeker or the job, right? They're like, okay, and we know that staffing's tough and job coaching is tough, so we'll job coach. You guys have found the jobs, we'll help you out. People find jobs, and they're like, we can't do job coaching for an extended period of time. And extended period of time means like 90 days, VR rules or whatever, after stability, reasonable amount. And they keep doing this, and they keep just not being able to get out. I think I told you I told some of you that the last one was, you'll need just about a week of job coaching is needed. And it was like 4 months later when I was talking to they just can't get out of there without jeopardizing the job. So yeah, obviously that's not a great approach to employment. Is you don't know the employment seeker, you don't know the job, but you'll help with coaching. It's just you're putting yourself, not that the people are awesome. It's just you put yourself in a tough position. Where the thing that bugs me the most about it is that they're going to get blamed if it doesn't work out. Like the whole setup was wrong, but they're trying to do their best, and they probably have the most kind of exposure in terms of time with the person, time with the business, and they're going to be the ones that feel the pain from the individual, the support, family, the business. If it doesn't work out, so the opposite of that would be, obviously knowing the person, knowing the job, but then also making sure you can get out of there in a reasonable time frame, right? Making sure that you're not if you're needed the entire first day, that's probably, something may have been missed. There should be points on day one, when day one is actually day one, where you can fade or aren't involved in certain pieces of it, just that are just natural and obvious, that somebody else can take over, again, depending on the person. So anyway, so intersecting tasks are it's just a tool to try to build natural supports. And then, I know we all talk about this, but that person, the unconditional positive regard that we showed you, there's at least one person who can, I think, positively help the person positively interpret themselves or positively interpret the person, right? And that just means like we'll work with people who like all of us will maybe communicate in a way that's not so clear sometimes, and so there's somebody who's going to give that person the benefit of the doubt, and we'll do that repeatedly, and support the person to get whatever they need. So I think that happens often during job development when you're negotiating or restructuring a job, so I think that's something to think. And again, like that's a really good skill. If you can be somebody who can be aware of that and make it a priority, and then really come through with that. That's pretty awesome. So, and then the other thing that intersecting tasks help with is a fading or ongoing support plan, because if you have this is like, even if everybody in the person's life is a true believer, which is awesome, and it's fully supportive, the questions are going to come up like, well, what happens if this happens, right? Or at this time of day, if I need to get a hold of X, Y, Z, or whatever. So the fading and ongoing support plan and kind of who who's responsible in terms of like manager or coworkers that are taking that on, and as they would with anybody, not something different, like who are the important people are that the mentor stuff, the training plan, the natural trainers, but also it's gonna help justify and buttress, I guess, or support the fading and ongoing support plan, right? Because we're gonna know, and again, it will change as time passes with any business, but we're gonna know why it's okay for us to fade, right? Well, Johnny's guy is handling the training. So I'm not, maybe I was there at the beginning during orientation or the initial familiarity with the layout, lay of the land, lay of the work. But they started, the training started, and I was just kind of making sure, that it was going great or went all right, and I'm available if any questions are there, but not needed for that piece, right? And I'll find a way to make sure, talking with Johnny or the trainer to make sure that the quality indicators and the learning happens and the performance happens as needed. Obviously be involved in any suggestions or accommodations as needed, but that that kind of builds the details of the fading, and sometimes it's just, well, I'm going to fade, and there's not a knowledge of kind of, well, who's the go-to, for you, and then you can communicate that to others. I think that's maybe what scares people a lot, about fading. Especially in the cases where we're working with, I don't have time, but I think I mentioned to somebody that there's this wonderful woman we're working with who has told us, like, she always wants a support staff with her. So she's like, she's received supports her whole life, and her staff are telling her, like, you're ready to spread your wings and fly and all this great stuff. And she's just really nervous about it. She's a bit older. And so I just had people with her. I don't think it's really sometimes for supports, but I think also probably just moral support, kind of, or just used to it by now. She's, so it's just it's a fun thing to go to engage with her and have the conversation about, are you saying that, like, forever in every imaginable scenario that you feel like you'll need like a paid staff, and we walk through all the different scenarios about, we're worried that your job is dependent on staff, and what happens if, staffing issues, if staff don't show up, and blah, 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 all that stuff. And maybe, we don't know what the budgets are yet, totally. So what if you have to limit your hours? But could you imagine where somebody, like, because we had a couple of informational interviews where it seemed like their employees, that they'd be willing to, we're at the beginning of the job development process where the employees would step in and play some of those roles. But so she's on her way, but you probably had conversations with parents or with others that are, I don't know if convinced is the right word, but have a hard time seeing how it can work. And so that's why, it's just not, it's important for people to understand that we are going to fade, and in circumstances where that's, sometimes, again, there are some supports that staff will be there, and that's not what this is about, but we can talk about that another time. But it's important for people to understand that, but it's also important for us to provide information and be a bit more specific besides just, hey, we're going to fade and there's going to be an ongoing support plan. Okay. And I think that, again, this is taking a lot from the systematic instruction training, but I think that when we're going to be involved and how we're going to, be involved in the process is going to be determined by our comfortability, of pulling other people on board, of us being involved in teaching, especially for tasks that maybe aren't, I mean, those of us that have done rolling silverware, we know how to do that, of course, if you've been involved in that, but other things like using a spray tanning machine or spray tattoos, one person I was involved in or worked with, or using like an excavator or a bobcat. I'm not super handy with that kind of stuff. I just think that we have to understand that it's, if we don't know how to do something, then we can't teach it. And so I think that goes both ways for the logic there as well. Then why are we trying to teach some of this stuff? If we can't ever teach it better than somebody. I could never teach somebody how to use an excavator if I were to spend a month on it, right? Or a lot of time on it, and somebody's been doing it their whole life, or other tools, or and so part of it points to like, why are we even thinking about being the primary teacher? And then the other part, so it speaks to that, yeah, we need to find a way to help the natural trainers, the natural people teach that. But we also have to figure out, the other thing is we don't want to avoid those things because we don't know how to teach them, right? We need to learn how to be involved and how to be effective as a consultant, as a facilitator. But those kind of more intricate, kind of more involved skills, depending on the person we're supporting, should be available. We just have to figure out an effective way to facilitate that, right? So we're not saying, well, I don't know how to do it, therefore you can't do it because I don't know how I'd ever teach you, right? That we're open to the idea that people who don't have our training and rehabilitation or job coaching, whatever, have access themselves to very skillful ways to convey that information, and then we have to figure out a way to be the bridge. So that's rule one. We're thinking about job coaching is go natural. And again, just common sense stuff. This is new for consultative employment supports. This is like systematic instruction, job coaching stuff. So when you think about who the learner is and who the teacher is, right, the learner is the employment seeker. Who's the right person, the natural person to teach in the workplace, given what's being taught. And so the default is, and again, this is going to be a tough conversation to have with businesses, where, because we've taught them that we're kind of, does anybody have, I think I've talked with a few of you, does anybody have a story like where you've been, I thought maybe a couple, Julie, I don't know if you've shared that, or somebody else, where like you're, business is expert in the business, but you're the expert on disability, and people, somebody, I don't know if it's in this group, was telling me where an employer was asking how they speak to a person. Could you share that? Julie, is that okay?
Yeah, I've actually had that more than once. I've had employers actually come around and be like, well, how do I talk to them?
Yeah.
And I'm like a person? I mean, granted, I'm a smart ass and everything, but I'm literally looking at them like, well, you talk to them just like you would Joe over there or Sally over there. And I've had employers be like, well, what do I pay them? And it's never referring to them by their first name. It's referring to them as them. And I'm like, well, what do you pay everybody else that does the same job they do? Well, blah, blah, blah. Well, then that's probably what you should pay them. I mean, because they're doing the same job as everybody else. And well, I don't know how to talk to them. And I'm like, well, how do you talk to Joe? You know what I mean? Like if they're doing the same job as everybody else is doing, then you should treat them the same as everybody else. Yeah. And it is so hard for certain employers to get that. Like, instead of, we've had people employed at one business in town for like 2 years, and she will still call me anytime. And like, these people have been closed, their case is closed. We just do periodic checks, and she will still call me anytime there's an issue. And I'm like, well, did you talk to her? Well, no, I called you. Okay, I understand that, however, they are your employee, and at some point you have to be stepping up to the plate, and I don't know, it's just frustrating.
No. So thanks. Like a few things I wanted to ask. So I think it's interesting, right? So what we're saying here is like you got it, business. Like, you're the expert in your business. And I think that's what sometimes happens is there's this bit of a pushback of yeah, for everybody else, but not this, or not them, using the word you said they were saying. Where do you think that comes from? Or I know that's a general question, but I mean, what do you think if you're trying to map that out, like where that comes from? What do you think?
Honestly, I think employers are, for lack of a better word, scared. Like they don't know how to approach somebody that has a disability. They don't know if they should approach them as like anyone else, or if they should approach them in a more delicate manner. But one thing that truly pisses me off is when I hear them talk to them like they are children. Like, they are not 5 years old. This person is older than you are. Please treat them like the adult that they are and speak to them like the adult that they are. I mean, I'm a little nicer when I say it to them, but I really do think it comes from maybe not so much fear, but maybe lack of knowledge, or I don't know. I don't even know if it's ignorant. I think it's just not knowing or not having the experience of talking to, working with people with disabilities. I mean, honestly, I think that's a lot of it. There's such a stigma around people with disabilities that they're kind of like walking on eggshells, so to speak, because they don't know what to say without possibly offending somebody.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Does anybody have any shared experience or perspective on that? And obviously, you're talking about somebody with well, I don't know if it's obvious, but with a recognizable disability, somebody who they would know from spending time with had a disability, as opposed to somebody who may choose to not disclose. Anybody have like a point of view or idea? I mean, I have some thoughts on some of that stuff. I'm curious what y'all. Similar circumstances? Hey, Brace.
I would agree with Julie. It's just a level of a lack of knowledge, and for a better words, and sometimes it's just straight up ignorance. Whether they refuse to acknowledge it or, who knows? I mean, recently I've had a situation where we have a young man we work with, and his disability is more of an unseen one. He has more of a mental health, kind of an antisocial disorder, if you were just to label it. And I've actually had my employer come up like, are you sure this guy has a disability? Mm-hmm. And so you'd have to retrain them. And then, like Julie mentioned, after the case has been closed and you have someone who's been employed with them for a number of years, you still get those random calls of like, what do I do?
Yeah.
What have you done before? A lot of the times it's those little pokes and prods, like, you are the employer, they are the employee.
Yeah.
Treat them as such. Yes, they may have a physical disability or mental disability, but that doesn't mean they're to be treated any different. Sometimes you need to be, be more soft-spoken, or we have a young man who just recently got into a job. You have to be point blank, dry, to the point. And teaching the employer that this is the best way to communicate with this individual.
Yeah.
So it's a level of training, a level of encouraging, and then sometimes it's the little reminders. But I can agree with Julie. There's a ton of frustration when it comes about it, where we've been in this realm of work for a number of years, and it's easy to say, well, why don't you get it? I get it. You should as well. And
right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think, and again, I know, like most any idea of good management is about like managing to the person, right? Like you always have to take somewhat of a unique approach, but I guess I know workplaces don't always work like that. People don't have time sometimes to find out about everybody, you know, those with and without disabilities, what works best for them, but or they say they don't have time.
I wanted to actually comment earlier when you were talking about how if we don't know how to do something, we probably shouldn't be the ones teaching it. This same particular place, when we've had people employed there, they were literally like, okay, well, they have to do this, this, and this, and then just left us to train them. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, it's a good thing I have food service under my belt because I was able to wing it, but I shouldn't have to wing it because then I feel like I'm not training them to the best of, or as good as they should be trained, like you said, because it's somebody in the business should be the ones to train them, not us. But we find that a lot actually, where they're like, okay, well, or they expect the job coach to do the work as well. And we've had to explain, okay, we are here as a support for Joe over here. We're not here to do the work ourselves. We are not your paid employees. We are here to support your paid employee. And a lot of employers don't understand that. They're like, well, you're here. Why aren't you helping and doing the work? Well, because I'm not teaching them anything if I'm going to do it for them. I don't know if anybody else runs into that, but that's another frustration.
Does anybody else have that, the 2-for-1, we used to call it?
Oh yeah, that's come across recently.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll walk off and I'll come by and grab them by the shirt tail and like, whoa, I'm just here to help them. You need to train them. You know, you know, I may help you reword it or be that extra hands, but I'm not doing the job.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Anybody else besides Julie and Bryce? You two are the go-to people during the content creators. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I think, you know, part of me wonders, like, you know, obviously, I mean, everybody's doing their best to communicate. Like, what, you know, is there somehow? I think what's happening. I think sometimes a few things are happening. Our lack of exposure, just, you know, lack of experience of businesses because of how the employment rate's been, you know, not so great for people with disabilities and especially significant disabilities. And so lack of, like, ignorance, just not knowing what that means, you know, literally, like, not knowing, I think also that it's possible, although it's hard to verify, that they probably had an interaction somewhere with a provider, you know, or I sometimes worry, I know, like, we're seeing a lot more like the transition stuff. Like there's a person we're working with right now on one of our projects that is working for free at a for-profit business, like as part of a crew, basically a 1-for-3, excuse me, a supported employment. Well, it's not paid, so she's one of 3 support staff, and there's a staff there at this business, and go figure, the business doesn't hire people. You know, they don't. They are the site for the training, for the pre-eds. And so I think that we may not be seeing, you know, we may not be aware of that, but I think there's some of that happening, somehow informing, you know, again, lack of seeing the person as an individual, the support's there. And yeah, the other thing I just ask is, and again, I know you guys are doing a great job, just, you know, what, is there anything that y'all can do up front, you know, to set the stage? And I know you can say it 1,000 times and still people get it, they get it. And then when it comes time, they don't get it. So I've experienced that and I know that. But I just wonder if there's any way to set the stage at the beginning. I do think that's one of the reasons I do love more individualized approaches, because if you're negotiating, if you're having conversations, if you're structuring, you can build that in and emphasize, even if you're restructuring the job description, write it in there. And again, I know it still may get missed, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I just think I think that probably they're getting bad information just when they are exposed. sometimes I worry about these transition programs that aren't about hiring, that are more about just getting, I don't know. But I have had the experience, I told you the story about where like just sometimes just difference, just has this thing that it does to our brains. It kind of short circuits. It triggers, my description is it triggers our lizard brains, so that we start thinking I like to think of it's kind of, we become dumb, we become kind of stupid. It's ignorant. And it had I think I shared this story. It was the best description of my experience was when somebody was working, Mary Jane had been working for like nine months at the time. And I was stopping by to say hi, check on, see how it's going. And the guy, I think I told you, this guy in like with a tie, he was talking to the owner. I saw him kind of nonchalantly try to hide a point at MJ, Mary Jane, and then he left. And then he had a kind of briefcase kind of bag thing. So it was at a nursery, a tree nursery. So he wasn't an employee or anything. And so right after that, the owner came and talked to me, and she said, who covers her workers' comp? And it was 9 months on the job. And it's like, it's like, you cover them. You pay the taxes on that every payroll, right? It's just oh yeah, right. And what had happened was, sorry to tell the story again, was it was an insurance person, and he's assessing risk and blah blah blah, and somehow picked up Mary Jane had a visible disability, and and then just like difference, that's different, whatever. And so this very like wonderful employer person, just like her brain just went blank in that kind of commonsensical. She knows that she pays, that she cuts her check, and she knows what the deductions are, and she knows how that works. But it was just whatever this external factor kind of pointing that out, and him having he was the insurance dude, and so it's interesting. The other thing I just get confused about maybe is, all of us have, we're all pretty, more and more these days, I think, exposed to like family members and friends, or family members of friends with disability. And so I'm just, I just think it's the work environment, that again, it's a place that we have not been super successful at. So in terms of examples and positive role models, to point to stories, I just think that we gotta, figure that out. So anyway, so when we say go natural, we understand that there may be, when we're saying, look, I'm not the best person to, hopefully you don't have to explain that too much. If you start explaining too much, you're probably not in the best place. But so this is your business, this is your processes. You want the work done the way it's done. They should be trained just like any other. They're your new employee, trained like anybody else. And so, as much as when we get that pushback, it's good to as skillfully demur. I prefer not to. I don't know. There's a lot of ways I need to skillfully sidestep that and explain assuming you've done the stuff up front, explaining what your role is, or you can make sure the expectations are known without getting into a kind of tug of war, power struggle, or anything like that, or pissing anybody off. So the job task process is training supports people, culture, social, environmental stuff that we need to pay attention to. So then, when we're looking at what needs to be taught, and again, this is ideally, I think the last one when we did job analysis, we talked about how day one really shouldn't be day one. If we can, I think that may be a lot that could help too, if we could spend some time at the workplace with the people who are going to be responsible, whoever was responsible for the hiring, who's going to be responsible for the training. If we could spend some time there, I think we could maybe get a jump on that. If we figure out what needs to be taught, we underline how it's going to go, in terms of just like any other employee. But if we spend some time in businesses so that before day one we can do some of this stuff, I think it could help do some of that. So and then when we're trying to facilitate workplace supports, we are going to be involved in some fashion. we're there, right? But we want to make sure that it's not interfering. That we're not like the example has been told to me is like we tend to drive a wedge in between people and the natural supports. It's just us being there, like you said. Like, I mean, it's very rational. You're here, do something. You know, why are you here then? So there's, you know, I get what you're saying, and you know, but we don't, you know, just our presence. It's that old kind of physics thing that the observer alters what's being observed, right? We have an impact on the environment, even if we want to be a ghost, we want to be invisible. We can't be. So we just have to. We have to. I think if you're as you know have done this, like you understand that, and you can play with that. You know, you can find ways to describe yourself in a way that's you know, why, if you're here, you know, why you do something? Well, you know, that's a good, that shouldn't really be here, you know, or I'm just going to be here, but I'm in the shadows, you know, I'm an observer, I'll help out as needed. But believe me, it's good for you. It's good for, you know, to train the employee, to figure out what's work. It's great for them, build relationships, they figure out what works for them. I'm a resource, right? Available as needed, PRN. So anyway, so we're looking at natural supports. You know, but we also can be skillful at how to bring people together. You know, again, if it's potluck, you know, if you notice that, make sure the person signed up for that. Make sure that maybe the trainer or something, you know, that person that views them in positive regard can help the person sign up for it. Maybe, you know, help the person now with phones. You know, you can. I mean, I have 500 alarms on my phone right now. You know, and if it works, you know, maybe they can set an alarm for every Friday or Thursday afternoon for a Friday potluck or whatever, to have the alarm go off, pick a potluck thing, right? Take a picture of it, send it to your mom or whatever. You know, for each part, I mean, with technology now, I think that we can find different ways to figure that out. Cool. And then, you know, within reason, you know, when we're looking at the job site analysis, what needs to be taught, you know, I think we probably can anticipate there are certain things that may need more attention, you know, and again, I think the default settings are, how does training go, you know, naturally? Who's the trainer? You know, how are they training it? What method, like communicating verbally, hands-on, you know, in writing, demonstration, and then how does the job get done? Those three things, the people, the ways it gets translated, and then the methods of doing the thing. You can probably, if you do analysis, you can identify there are some things that's likely, you know, that probably is going to need some more attention. And you know, if it's going to need more than a reasonable amount of attention, I think that we want to start thinking about how we're going to facilitate that, how we're going to consult in that case. So. So we want to just, you know, think about that. So, okay, so there's a few scenarios. Again, these are from some trainings we've done before. I wanted to ask you, I'm going to give you maybe just a minute, if that's okay, for each. I'm going to just look at these and just think or jot down some ideas. I'll set a minute on my timer. All right. Actually, I'll need to take a break. Okay, so just some ideas. Josh treats to close the bathroom door at work, or do you assume that's happened repeatedly?
I guess my initial question for this one is he forgetting to close it while he's using it, or does he forget to close it when he leaves?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. So, depending on what's going on. Not a big deal sometimes, but pretty big deal others maybe.
Oh, easiest thing that comes to my mind is hang up a sign on the door.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what I was going to say.
A sign, yep. Yeah. Now, what if he did that and that didn't work? Or what if he, let's say he doesn't read? Or you could put a symbol or something, but what if, let's say that didn't work? And I think I told somebody, and this scenario was it was a kind of a shop floor where there were workers, and it was a farm supply store where the customers would come in to the work area and there'd be workers there. So it wasn't just like in the back that nobody, potentially the public could kind of see. It wasn't a huge bathroom either.
Is there another bathroom in the facility that he can use that there wouldn't be more eyes to see him if he didn't shut the door?
Not at this place. But that's a good idea. There was.
Could he pee in a bush out back? I don't know. I ain't got nothing.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would work. And it would be very culturally appropriate at that where he works, that wouldn't piss anybody off.
I know sometimes doors close automatically.
Yeah, they have those.
Put a spring on the door and closes shut when he opens it. And
yeah, so that was where we ended up, is that those pressure thing, the automatic closing, things like having your screen door at home, or so yep, cool. And then that's again an example of like something that I mean, like in this case, it was like, if you don't know all the options of solutions, you're like, oh gosh, this is something like dignity, you just not typical, in terms of, just kind of the potential uncomfortability. So just a simple kind of universal design solution, right? You have to make sure it's still accessible, and but yeah. Cool. And that's just a simple, like, okay. I sometimes forget to close it, or sometimes you don't close it and there's a lurch, where it'll open back up. So people could relate to that happening, and not a big deal. What about Jennifer breaks bandsaw blades often and then gets upset?
My thoughts were to maybe find out why she's breaking them. First of all, like, is she not putting them in correctly? So when she goes to use them, they're breaking. Is she using too much pressure on them? Is she not cutting the appropriate things that you can cut with a bandsaw blade? And then go from there, I guess, and find, figure out the solution or why.
Yeah. So retraining, right? Could be just a training issue. Retraining, or yep. And I'm not really into bandsaws and stuff, but I know that, like, where we got this one from, like, breaking a bandsaw, I mean, often is a judgment, but it wasn't a big deal, just something happened sometimes, part of the process of what they were producing. So it could be just teach her how to, retrain, maybe teach her how to, it's not a big deal, like, if you can, and just teach her how to replace them. Ed quits working when assembly parts run out. Any ideas there?
Does he know where the parts are kept? Is it safe for him to access his own parts?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I think just this is a process question. That's great. So, and I think that in this instance, the person, sometimes people are, just whatever the setting is, like being passive is like a good trait in many settings where people with support needs spend time, right? Not causing too much trouble. And so, so in this instance though, not good, right? That if he needs something, he needs to learn how to get it for the specific test. So if in one setting, he's waiting for people to give him what he needs to do the thing, in another set, right? So in many workshops, they kind of split up the work, to make sure everybody has some amount of work. And so if somebody's doing it quicker, like someplace I've worked, I don't know if it's still always the case. They can't just go and grab more work because it's being spread out, it's being passed out so that it's equal, relatively so. So in this case, yeah, just teach them, where to go when parts run out. Or maybe there's something about, when your shift starts, maybe the bin needs to be bigger, wherever he gets the part. Maybe there's ways to just, or like after when shift starts or in between, when he goes to break, comes back, grabbing things. So make sure so it never runs out. Or, maybe the container, wherever the parts are, can be bigger to match, his productivity level and kind of the timing of his shifts. Cool. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. I want to move on to this one. I don't know if you guys remember this. This one I like. Sharon works in a bakery. She's usually in back, but sometimes brings products to the retail area where she'll ask customers how they are, if they're married, and if they if they like Elvis. What kind of supports scenarios do you think? She's come up and putting stuff up. Like bread, like in the retail where it's being sold.
Is this just like her way of just making conversation, or is this like she bombards the customers every time she comes out front with the same questions? And if so, I would say teaching her that, you can ask somebody how they are, or maybe how, the weather, but asking a perfect stranger personal questions is probably not appropriate. I mean, everybody has their own way of making conversation, I guess. So
yeah,
and maybe that's her way. But again, like I said, is this like she does this to everybody and it like freaks them out? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think most times people think it's no problem, but you'll catch the person or two. It's hard to find, who really hates Elvis, or, people don't feel like being, talk about their, people find any reason to get upset about something.
We actually have a gal that's, our center opened back up today, so yay. But we have a gal that is like obsessed with our local hockey team. Mm-hmm. They've won like the Roberts Cup and everything. And so she thinks everyone in the entire land should love hockey as much as she does. So every day she'll see and she'll be like, hockey? And I'm like, no, why? I'm like, I don't like hockey. And she's just like almost offended that, not everybody in the whole land loves hockey as much as her, but it's just kind of funny actually.
Yeah, she's just she needs to move to Canada. She's just in the wrong place, Yeah, so yeah, I think that's so I think that, and this is an example, I think, of where where the connection between I think, like Jessica was saying, between supports that may not be I think you don't need to figure this stuff out, but I think that when this person, and most likely when stuff like this happens, is that they aren't around a bunch of new people all the time, so that is her her attempt to even if it's kind of like the same questions. I mean, they're pretty good. I think they're pretty close to kind of how we interact with people. How you doing? How's your life going? What kind of music do you like? But it's not, strangers may not appreciate it, but it's her attempt to connect, right? And that second question about married could be, an expression of an interest in looking into that, right? If she's not married, so. But I think there could be ways to, you could work with her on maybe trying to add a question or two, right? And maybe she could, instead of bringing products to the retail area, maybe, because the idea was, like in this case, like her task didn't have specifically anything to do with customers. So perhaps if she could give samples or something, was it then that interaction with the customer could be a function, as opposed to like, I don't know about you, but I just always get, if I'm with somebody and I don't know what I'm supposed to say, like I'll just say whatever, and kind of not look very, very good. Just, what am I supposed to say to you? But maybe if she had a function, I feel comfortable if I have a function, and like my job is to try the sample. Hey, try the sample. Do you like Elvis? I don't know. Or maybe, I don't know. I think it's not too unsolvable, but okay. Well, we're moving on. I have a few minutes left. So sorry, I did not get through all this stuff. But so in terms of what's good enough, which is what we had talked about, that's just the idea in systematic instruction of is the and depends on the workplace. Is the process important? Because it's the business's choice. They decide. So does the process have to be step by step correct? Or and that's functional correctness, right? Just the outcome is good. Or does it have to be topographic? Again, that's a silly term for like it's got to look perfect the whole way through, every step of the method of doing the thing. And so depending on the business, I just think, what's good enough, right? And even with functional correctness, there's usually a variable acceptable quality, both, depending on what you're in production and services. And then, the other thing, when you're thinking about what to teach and what's going to need more attention, is that, depending on the person and the uniqueness of their lives and the impact of disability, that there are things that we're going to probably need to figure out, So the person I was talking about who wanted, or saying, I don't need staff always, like they did an informational review. She wants to work with children, as really badly. However, whenever we're in a place, it's just interesting. When we're in a place, we did some stuff and we figured it out, but when we're in job development, when she's thinking about job and working there, like the kids are unpredictable, right? And she likes young kids. And she's a person with a visual impairment. And so she's kind of tenses up. She's worried about getting knocked over a little bit. It's just interesting, that, and she's a little bit wary of kids make you weary, but she's wary of that. And so just this process of understanding, like, so we're gonna have to figure this out, right? Like, working with kids, is a goal that you've stated, and we've verified it during discovery. And we understand that whenever in any environment kids are present, it's going to be somewhat unpredictable, somewhat to totally unpredictable. And the kids love running up to people, right? That's what kids do. So we're going to have to figure that out, right? And so like we're in this process now of like when we look at workplaces of figuring that out, that's what I just think it's something like a discrepancy analysis, typical person inventory. This idea of, and the example we use in the training is like, if you go to the movies, like if I were to go to the movies, I'm somebody with not a visible disability except my eyesight, and like the steps it takes and the amount of mental effort and consideration for the environment and powerful like alterations or adaptations, accommodations aren't much. And the relative simplicity, if that makes sense, versus complicated, if for her, that she's going to have to figure out a ride, and she lives with somebody else. So when she's at home, there's a staff person. She can't. How about money? The considerations about which she's figured out a lot. Once you get there, she can figure that out. But there's just a lot, depending on the person, of just some things I think we can anticipate that we're going to need to pay attention to based on the impact, who the person is, the impact of disability, and the complexity of their lives. So, so right now, that's just something that's really interesting is like balancing this, this love for, and the thing for children with like children also make the workplace environment pretty unpredictable. And from her perspective, in certain circumstances, potentially dangerous. We're trying to figure that out now. But so sorry, it's 4:30. I'll make sure, I think I can fit these in some later training topics. I'll figure that out. It's good stuff. You can read the slides. Sorry to, I definitely knew I had too many slides today, but yeah. So if you spend some time with that consultant, I think it's relatively new. I think it was just published in In July, again, it's nothing you need to memorize, or it's just a bunch of ideas. The content is in the teachings and how we do it. But again, it's if you were involved in the discovery one or the job development one, it's an effort of ours to push what we're doing towards like evidence-based practices. And I think it's pretty cool step of we're like, what are the qualities of good support on the job? So I don't think there's much there that anybody would disagree with, but just curious everybody's thoughts on that. So but yeah, well, it's 4:30 my time, Eastern. I appreciate everybody being on and participating and all that. And is it cold there? We got fall weather here, so no, sorry. Well, yesterday, I haven't been outside yet today. It was nice over the weekend. I think it's a bit warmer today.
Well, if you consider 90 degrees cold, then sure.
Oh gosh, really? Jeez.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like 96 or something tomorrow. I'm like, oh, gross. I'd rather have like 70 with a light breeze if I could pick. We're watching
Halloween starting October 1st. We're watching all the scary movies. Halloween, the originals are first. My 11-year-old is he says he's ready for it, but I don't know, we'll see. We need that weather, to really have it hit home.
We're Halloween freaks in my house, like that holiday and anything remotely grotesque and scary that go along with it. So
cool. Yeah, we love that too.
All right.
Well, thanks. Happy Monday.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.